Well, my name is Nirmal Shant. I'm a circuit judge. That means a judge in the Crown Court. I deal with only criminal cases. I was called to the bar, that is, became a barrister in 1984. Before that, I went to university, Leicester University, and qualified as a barrister in 1984. And since then, until 2015, I practiced as a barrister. And in 2015, I became a judge. In 2016, I became what's called a resident judge. That's a judge who actually looks after the welfare of the staff in a particular place and the other judges, and that I do that at Derby. I'm also responsible for listing of the cases. So that's a sort of broad outline of what I do as a resident judge. Before I became a judge, I was a barrister for many years. As I said, I qualified in 1984, and I was a criminal barrister for many years, prosecuting and defending. I was what's called a junior barrister. That doesn't mean junior in age, but junior in terms of doing cases that are not done by Queen's Counsel. Queen's Counsel is a sort of elevation within the job. You have to apply and become that. And once I became that in 2007, I started doing much more serious cases such as murders, fraud and other serious crimes. So it was sort of elevation in the sort of crime that I was dealing with. So I did that for a number of years until 2015. Well, a typical day will usually mean a number of meetings in the morning before I start my workday. As a resident judge, I'm responsible for the court and the running of the court and listing. So what I do is I will have a number of meetings in the morning, perhaps with the probation service or my officer who lists cases in the Crown Court, or with the prison. It could be any number of people and organisations that the court has dealings with. So the day will often start with a number of meetings. And at 10:30, I'll go into court. I only do criminal cases, so I'll conduct a trial. And quite often, the end of the day will also involve a number of meetings to organise with organisations that have contact with the court. I certainly had an early interest in the law. I used to watch, and some people are probably too young to remember this programme. It was called Crown Court. It was a trial with actors, but real people pretending to be a jury would come to a verdict, and I was absolutely riveted by it. So I used to watch that, and certainly when I was a teenager, thought I would want to be a barrister. I loved the wigs they were wearing and the robes they were wearing, and I had an idea that that's what I wanted to do. But I do remember that when I went to my careers teacher, I went to a comprehensive school. And although I was fairly high up in my class, when I mentioned to my careers teacher that I wanted to be a lawyer, it's quite interesting. Her response was that Woolworths was still recruiting and that perhaps I ought to take my sights a little lower than that and apply to Woolworths. So thankfully, I didn't take her advice, and I did apply to read law at Leicester and enjoyed I'm enjoying a very good career in the law. As far as being a judge during the pandemic is concerned, the courts have worked very hard to keep the justice system going. And it's been tough, but it's been tougher still on the staff in the Crown Courts because they've been predominantly responsible for keeping things going. We were also very quick with our technology. And although we are still doing quite a lot of work remotely, jury trials were resurrected very quickly in this country so that we could continue with the proper administration of law and order and justice. I think it's important, actually, if you want a career in the law, to recognise that actually your upbringing doesn't matter. It's an interest in the law that matters. And it's important that you follow that passion if you have it, and don't let anybody deter you on the basis that you haven't had a particular kind of upbringing. The bar and the judiciary have become far more diverse now than they were when I started in 1984. And that's thanks largely to the effort of the Bar Council, Law Society, and those in the upper echelons of the profession. So I would say quite firmly, no, it doesn't matter what your upbringing is. It's more important that you have a passion for the law and you want to apply yourself and work hard to get a career. So don't let anybody put you off or tell you that there's only a particular kind of upbringing that enables you to become a judge. As a judge, I think one of the most important qualities you have to have is to be fair-minded and not biased, to have that ability to put aside any bias. We all have them, whether we recognise them or not, but recognising them and putting them aside and being fair-minded is very important. Having good judgment is very important, and having an analytical mind. Last but not least, actually, the ability to relate to people, particularly in the sort of criminal law or family law, where you'll be dealing with people every day. So the ability to understand situations, weigh them up, and actually relate them to people who have interaction with the courts is extremely important. So it's a mixture of a number of skills that makes a good judge and indeed a good barrister or solicitor. But certainly a high for me was becoming a Queen's Counsel and being able to do the much more serious cases. That was a high. It's a recognition that you have the ability to do more serious cases. But when I became a judge, that was also a particular high in 2015, because I felt that I'd enjoyed being in the profession for so long. But as a judge, really, you're serving the public. And the opportunity to serve the public through serving as a judge was something that I was particularly excited about. It's not an easy job, but it was one that enabled me to bring a sort of neutral approach to the job. I'd been used to being on one side or another, but the ability to sit, listen, be neutral and approach a case in that way and serve the public in that way, I think that was a career high for me. Sentencing is a difficult task. You're dealing with the liberty of another individual, and I've always found it difficult in that context. But in terms of sentencing itself, the exercise, the judicial exercise, we have sentencing guidelines now for a number of offences. Indeed, I would say the majority of offences. So we tend to look first to the sentencing guidelines to determine our approach. But as I've said, that being done, putting and analysing people's circumstances is still a human exercise, and it's a combination of applying the sentencing guidelines in a humane and fair-minded way and coming to, as much as it's possible, an individual decision for that individual. So it's a difficult exercise, but it is assisted by the sentencing guidelines, which ensure a consistent approach by judges. Yes, it's the short answer. I think that when I started, and it makes me sound very old, but I started back in 1984, the profession was very different then to what it is now. And I think part of the difficulties was not being able to see role models doing the job that I wanted to do. In fact, in the time that at the time I first qualified, I was only aware of one other Asian female who was a barrister. And I wrote to her to ask if I could shadow her, but there was a lack of role models, lack of a sort of vision of who I could be. And I think that was difficult. But as I've said earlier, the profession has changed. A great deal's been done to make sure that people are aware that we are a diverse profession now, and more is being done to emphasise the point that actually your upbringing does not matter. It's your ability to work hard, it's your ability to get the qualifications, and your passion to be in the law that matters. Well, I think it has. I mean, you've only to look at the profession, that the judiciary now, the face of the judiciary, are people, it includes people like me and others from different backgrounds. So the face of the judiciary has changed. I'm not saying we've arrived where we want to be, but certainly there's been huge change in my professional lifetime to the face of the judiciary, and that's largely due to the work that's been done by different organisations, but also those within the profession at the upper end of the profession, recognising that this is an important issue. So it has changed, and it continues to change, but more work does need to be done. I think the main misconception people have about judges generally is that we are out of touch with reality and people's real lives. Speaking as a criminal barrister and a judge dealing with criminal cases, the reality is that we see far more of life than most people see at all. So it is a misconception to think that we're detached from reality and that we don't see people for what they are. The reality of it is we see far too much sometimes and have a great understanding of the way people are and the challenges for some people. The rule of law, to me, means a civilized society. Because without the rule of law, we could not function as a civilized society. It really underpins such a society. And that's why it's important. You've only to see a slight breakdown in the rule of law in other countries to realise that actually it underpins our treatment of people who are vulnerable, people who don't have power. It is absolutely imperative that we obey the rule of law because it underpins our very way of life. So it's absolutely essential for a civilised society. It seems obvious to say that, but that is true. We take it for granted, but it's hugely important. Well, only this, that over the years, I've been quite passionate about ensuring that people from different backgrounds aren't deterred from joining the profession. As a barrister, I was the representative for the Bar Council on my circuit. I set up an organisation called Midland Asian Lawyers Association with others. The idea of that was to encourage those within the profession and also students to have a better understanding of what being in the law meant and to be able to network within the law, to have access to parts of the profession that they might not have. And I'm proud to say that, in fact, we started off probably with a membership of about 10 to 40 people, which included the committee of 10. But now it's an organisation that is hugely influential. There's about 400 people that attend an annual dinner every year, and the membership has just gone from strength to strength. So I feel quite strongly that actually these sorts of organisations in particular areas will encourage people from diverse backgrounds to come and see, to network within the profession, to understand that actually it is a profession that's open to all. And that doesn't mean just people from different backgrounds in terms of their heritage, but also in terms of different social groups. Again, I do some work for Derby University. We have students who come to us who've come from challenging backgrounds and despite that have started doing law degrees.